Imagine a world where Iran has access to nuclear weapons. What could be the potential consequences? As we explore this scenario, it's crucial to remember the global concerns that such a development would generate. The first and foremost concern is the potential for a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. If Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons, other nations in the region might feel compelled to follow suit. This would escalate the already tense situation in the Middle East, prompting an arms race that could destabilize the region further. With an increasing number of nations possessing nuclear weapons, the risk of nuclear conflict escalates, threatening not only the Middle East but also the wider world. Secondly, we must consider the heightened tension with Israel, a nation that Iran has often been at odds with. The acquisition of nuclear weapons by Iran would undoubtedly put Israel on high alert, potentially leading to a higher likelihood of conflict. This would not only be a threat to the stability of the Middle East, but also to global peace as well. Moreover, there is the ever-present risk of nuclear weapons falling into the hands of terrorist groups. Iran has in the past been accused of supporting various militant groups. The fear is that these groups with their destructive ideologies could potentially get their hands on nuclear weapons, giving them the power to wreak havoc on a massive scale. These concerns, while they may seem hypothetical, are very real. They underline the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences of a nuclear Iran. The stakes are high, and the world watches with bated breath as the situation unfolds. As we navigate through this complex and delicate issue, it's clear that the implications of a nuclear Iran are vast and far-reaching. The global community must remain vigilant and proactive in addressing this issue, working together to maintain peace and stability. Now that we have set the stage, let's delve deeper into Iran's nuclear program. Iran's nuclear program didn't start yesterday. In fact, it goes back to the 1950s. In the midst of the Cold War, the United States, under President Eisenhower, launched the Atoms for Peace initiative. This program was designed to share nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, and Iran, under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was among the nations to jump on board. As part of this agreement, the Shah established the Tehran Nuclear Research Center in the early 1960s and, with the help of the United States, began to train Iranian students in nuclear science. The goal was clear: to use nuclear power as a source of energy, not as a weapon. However, as the 1970s rolled in, suspicions began to rise about the true intentions of Iran's nuclear program. Despite the Shah's claims that the program was purely for energy purposes, there were whispers about a potential shift towards nuclear weapons. These whispers grew louder with the discovery of a secret uranium enrichment plant in the late 70s. Then the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979, causing a major shift in Iran's nuclear trajectory. The Shah was overthrown, and the Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini took over. The new regime initially put the nuclear program on hold, but by the mid-1980s it was revived, this time with a seemingly more militaristic intent. Fast forward to the 21st century, and Iran's nuclear program is a hot topic of international debate. Despite Iran's insistence that its program is peaceful, the international community, led by the United States and its allies, has imposed numerous sanctions on Iran, citing non-compliance with nuclear agreements. The journey to where we are today has been long and complex, but what could the future hold? Predicting the future is always tricky, but there are a few potential scenarios we can consider when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. Firstly, let's contemplate the possibility of Iran successfully developing nuclear weapons. In this scenario, Iran could potentially elevate its strategic standing in the Middle East, becoming a deterrent force against other regional powers. However, this could also escalate tensions, leading to a nuclear arms race in one of the most volatile regions in the world. Alternatively, we could imagine a diplomatic resolution. This would likely involve Iran agreeing to halt its nuclear program in return for relief from economic sanctions, much like the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, that was agreed upon in 2015. This would ideally lead to a more stable Middle East, with Iran reintegrating into the global economy and potentially acting as a stabilizing force in the region. However, we must also consider the possibility of a continued stalemate. If the current state of affairs persists, with Iran continuing its nuclear program and the international community imposing sanctions, the situation could remain tense. Iran's economy would likely continue to suffer under the weight of these sanctions, and the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran would remain a significant concern for the international community. In each of these scenarios, the role of external actors such as the United States, European Union, and other Middle Eastern states will be crucial. Their actions and reactions will significantly shape the trajectory of Iran's nuclear program and the broader regional dynamics. The future of Iran's nuclear program is uncertain, and each potential outcome carries with it a unique set of challenges and opportunities. The international community must remain vigilant, keeping a keen eye on developments and being ready to respond to ensure regional stability and global security. Each of these potential futures carries its own consequences and implications. The world is watching Iran closely, but how are different countries likely to respond to a nuclear Iran? As we delve into the international arena, we find a mosaic of varying perspectives and potential responses. The United States, for instance, has a long history of tension with Iran. If Iran were to develop nuclear weapons, the United States would likely respond with a combination of diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and potentially even military action. The objective: to deter Iran from using the weapon and to protect its allies in the region. Moving to the Middle East, Israel's stance is unequivocal. Given the historical animosity between the two nations, Israel views a nuclear Iran as an existential threat. Their response could range from diplomatic negotiations to preemptive strikes, all in an effort to neutralize the threat. Saudi Arabia, a regional rival of Iran, shares Israel's concerns. The kingdom would likely see a nuclear Iran as a direct challenge to its own regional dominance. Fearing a shift in the balance of power, Saudi Arabia might feel compelled to develop its own nuclear program, leading to a potential arms race in the Middle East. Across the Atlantic, the European Union's response would likely be more diplomatic. Striving to maintain regional stability, the EU would likely advocate for dialogue and negotiation, emphasizing the importance of nuclear non-proliferation. However, it's important to note that these responses are not set in stone. They are contingent on a multitude of factors, including the geopolitical climate at the time, the specifics of Iran's nuclear capabilities, and the domestic political situations in each of these countries. The global response to a nuclear Iran would be anything but uniform. It would be a complex weave of diplomatic negotiations, military posturing, economic sanctions, and perhaps even new alliances. The world's response would need to be calculated and measured, always keeping in mind the ultimate goal: to prevent the use of nuclear weapons and to maintain global peace and security. As we can see, the global response to a nuclear Iran would be multifaceted and complex. We've covered a lot of ground today, so let's take a moment to summarize our discussion. We began by delving into the potential implications of a nuclear-armed Iran. We touched upon the dramatic shift in power dynamics that would result, possibly leading to a new nuclear arms race in the Middle East. The security of the region, and indeed the world, could be significantly impacted, with the threat of nuclear conflict becoming a more palpable reality. Next, we journeyed back in time to explore the genesis of Iran's nuclear program. Originating in the 1950s with the aid of the United States as part of the Atoms for Peace program, Iran's nuclear ambitions have evolved dramatically over the decades, shaped by political shifts and international pressures. We then shifted our gaze to the future, contemplating the potential trajectories of Iran's nuclear program. We discussed the possibility of Iran continuing its nuclear development covertly, despite international opposition. Alternatively, it might choose to openly pursue nuclear weapons, risking severe global backlash. There's also the potential for a diplomatic resolution, although the road to such an outcome is fraught with challenges. Lastly, we examined the likely global response to a nuclear Iran. We reflected on the range of reactions, from diplomatic negotiations and economic sanctions to potential military intervention. The international community, led by the United Nations, would undoubtedly play a crucial role in managing this complex situation. In essence, the prospect of a nuclear Iran presents a multifaceted challenge that would reverberate across the globe. It's a scenario that demands careful consideration, informed dialogue, and decisive action from the world's leaders. While the future remains uncertain, one thing is clear: the world will be closely watching Iran's nuclear program in the coming years.